When I heard the howl of a dog through smoke and screaming, my breath caught, because I knew this was not an accident. At first, I thought it was only a terrified animal, a stray caught in the chaos like the rest of us. But the sound was not fear. It was a cry, sharp and urgent, almost like a call for help, and it pierced through the roar of fire and the shouting of neighbors. I was standing on the edge of the street, 50 years old and shaking like a child, watching flames eat the house I had known all my life. People were rushing out, men with soot on their faces, women clutching children, everyone stumbling toward safety. I could hardly breathe from the smoke, and then I saw him. The dog. He was no one's pet, at least not officially. We all knew him in town, a scruffy brown mutt who lived by the riverbank, never begging, never biting. Kids would sometimes slip him food, and he always wagged his tail. We thought of him as part of the scenery, like an old fence or a tree by the road. Nobody expected him to be more than that, but in that moment, he was not the stray we ignored. He was something else entirely. Through the haze, I watched him charge straight toward the burning doorway. People screamed after him. Someone tried to grab his tail, but he slipped through, vanishing inside the flames. I felt my stomach drop. It was insane. He was just a dog. He didn't know better. He would never come back out. And then he did. Staggering through the smoke, his fur singed and his paws bleeding, he emerged with something clutched against his chest. My eyes blurred, and for a second, I thought the fire was playing tricks on me, but it wasn't. He was dragging a child, a boy, no more than 6 or 7, choking, his face streaked black. The dog pulled him into the light like he had rehearsed it 100 times. The boy collapsed into the arms of his mother, who shrieked with relief, so piercing it cut through everything, the fire, the panic, even my disbelief. The dog stood there swaying, his sides heaving, his eyes wide and wet. For one heartbeat, the entire crowd froze. Even the sirens seemed to fade. We were staring at him like he wasn't real. And then the boy reached up with his tiny hands. He threw his arms around the dog's neck and sobbed into his fur. The dog didn't flinch. He didn't shake him off. He just leaned into it, his chest rising and falling like a man who had run a marathon. That was when it hit me. This dog wasn't acting by instinct. He wasn't chasing food or escaping danger. He had made a choice. He had gone into that fire to save a child. I thought my heart would break in two. Around me, people started to cheer and cry at once. One woman fell to her knees, whispering prayers. Another man wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Nobody could believe what they had seen. Nobody could look away. And still, even in the middle of that miracle, I caught myself thinking, this must be the end. That was his one great act. He'll collapse now. He'll let the fire burn itself out while we remember this moment forever. I was wrong, because the dog was already turning back toward the house, ears pinned, body trembling, like he knew there was more work left to do. But in that first moment, when the boy clung to him with every ounce of his little body, something inside me shattered. When the child gripped his neck and cried into his fur, I understood. This dog was saving lives for real, not in a story, not in a dream, but in front of my eyes. And I swear, even now, I can still see the look in his eyes. It wasn't the look of an animal. It was the look of a rescuer. When the dog turned back toward the fire, people lunged to catch his collar, shouting for him to stop. Hands reached, sleeves grabbed, someone threw a blanket like a net. He ducked under it, slipped past our knees, and shot forward, low to the ground, like a streak of mud and smoke. I felt panic flood my chest. He had already done more than any of us. I decided now he definitely would not return. I cupped my hands and yelled that the house was empty. I yelled it again, hoarse and certain, because I wanted it to be true. We had counted heads. We had seen the mother and the boy. We had seen the neighbors stumble out. There was no one else. The fire shouldn't take another life. The dog should not pay for our confusion. But he did not believe me. He did not even look back. He did not take the front door this time. He veered hard and hooked around the porch, claws scraping the boards, and vanished along the side yard where the smoke lay thick and low. I ran after him without thinking. Heat burned the hair on my arms. The hose shrieked somewhere behind me. A window shattered with a sound like ice breaking on a lake. I lost him in the gray. Then I heard it. Not a single howl, but 2 quick barks and a raw, dragging whine. It was not a call of pain. It was a signal. He was telling us where he was. He was telling us where to look. I came around the corner and saw him reared up against a narrow side window, paws on the sill, head cocked into the smoke. He was raking the wood with his claws, frantic but precise, like he knew a person could fit there if only we could make a hole. He locked eyes with me through the haze, and I felt it hit me like a fist. In his eyes there was something human, as if he understood lives were at stake. I grabbed a garden rake from the fence and smashed at the frame. Another man joined me with a pry bar. The glass fell inward. Hot air blew out and stung my face. The dog disappeared inside in one fluid motion, like a diver slipping under a wave. I shouted his name without having ever learned it. The fire answered with a deep, hungry groan. For a heartbeat, there was only roaring. Then a cough. Then another cough, thin and papery, like it came from a chest that had been tired for a long time. I shoved my head through the window and saw shapes moving in a room bent with heat. The dog was there, low and steady, shouldering under a figure on the floor. He nosed under an arm and pushed, backing, tugging at a wool sleeve with his teeth. The figure tried to lift his head and failed. "Old man," someone whispered behind me. "Good Lord, it's the old man." No one had seen him go in. He lived alone in the back room because the stairs hurt his hip. He did not shout much. He kept to himself and waved from his porch. In the chaos, we had not counted him. In the smoke, no one had heard him coughing. The dog had. I jammed my arms through the frame and reached for the man's shoulders. The heat bit my wrists. The dog grunted and shifted his weight like he understood what I was trying to do. He braced, put his chest against the floor, and dragged the sleeve toward me 1 hard inch at a time. Another pair of hands grabbed the man's belt. We pulled together, the 3 of us, 2 men and a stray, working like a single body against the fire. The man's shoe caught on a broken board. The dog noticed first. He let go of the sleeve, scrambled to the foot, and nudged the shoe free with his teeth. He turned back and took the sleeve again. He backed up, step by slow step, never looking away from the man's face. I could see his ribs heaving. I could see ash caked around his eyes like gray tears. We got the old man to the sill. The dog did not jump out and leave us to it. He planted his paws and pushed from behind as we hauled from the outside. The old man's hands found the frame. He moved like a puppet, limp but willing. We lifted. We spilled backward into the dirt in a tangle of arms and smoke and broken glass. For a second, no one breathed. Then the old man's chest hitched. He coughed again, hacking up black, and his eyes fluttered. He looked at me. He looked at the dog. His lips moved with no sound, and then a whisper came thin as thread. "Good boy." The dog collapsed onto his side and lay there with his tongue out, panting so hard it made a hollow sound in his throat. Someone brought water in a plastic bowl. He sniffed it and turned his head away. He was watching the old man. He would not drink until he saw the old man breathe. The paramedic slid in beside us, checked a pulse, rolled the old man gently, and covered him with a thin silver blanket. People were crying again. Not loud this time, soft, shaken tears that come when a thing you had already lost suddenly comes back. A woman pressed her hand to the dog's smoky fur and kissed her fingers. A boy wiped his nose and tried to smile. I felt my chest crack open with gratitude so fierce it hurt. Fear had clawed me raw when he ran back in. Awe poured through me when he showed us the window. Gratitude made my eyes burn when the old man's breath finally steadied. I kept looking at the dog, and then at the man, and then at the ruined house, trying to make the picture hold still. I wanted to believe this was the moment the story would let him rest. He had found the strength. He had shown us the way. He had pulled a life out of a fire no one else even knew was still there. I told myself he would lie down now and stay. I told myself he would not move again, but the dog lifted his head. He listened to something inside that none of us could hear. He pushed himself up on shaky legs and turned his face back to the fire. People started clapping without meaning to. It rose and fell like waves. Someone sobbed, someone laughed, someone just folded into someone else and held on. The old man was wrapped in a thin silver blanket. The boy was pressed to his mother's chest so tight his fingers went white. A neighbor took off his coat and put it over the mother's shoulders. For a breath, we were all one body, shaking but whole. The dog sat apart from the circle, close enough to watch, far enough to breathe. His fur was singed along the back like a field after a hard frost. The tips of his whiskers were curled. Ash clung to his lashes. He blinked slow, steady, as if counting our breaths for us. He did not whine. He did not ask for water. He held himself like a guard at a door only he could see. I came to him with a bowl and a soft towel. I crouched low, talking without thinking, the way you talk to a friend who has just done something impossible and you do not know how to say thank you without breaking. He let me wipe the smoke from his face. He leaned into my hand like it hurt and helped at the same time. His chest rose and fell in deep, dragging pulls. I could hear a rough rattle way down inside him. "Let me take him to the vet," I said, half to the crowd, half to the sky. "I have the truck. I can be there in minutes." Someone nodded. Someone else said the road was clear. The paramedic gave a quick look that said, "Yes, go, now." He handed me a spare blanket. It smelled like plastic and clean metal. I wrapped the blanket under the dog's belly and tried to lift. He was heavier than he looked. He did not fight me, not exactly. He settled his weight like a stone that does not want to be moved, but will allow it if you ask long enough. I told him we were done here. I told him he had done enough for one life. He let me slide him closer to the curb. He lay down with his head on my knee and watched the old man's chest rise under the silver sheet. Neighbors gathered around us. Hands hovered, not sure where to touch. Someone stroked his ears with 2 fingers, feather light. The boy broke free from his mother and knelt in the dirt and laid his cheek on the dog's shoulder. The dog closed his eyes for one moment and opened them again, like he had taken one sip of sleep and remembered he could not drink. I thought this was the turn where the story folded back on itself and rested. I thought he had accepted our blanket, our circle, our shaky applause. I thought he had decided to stay with us and let the fire burn itself out without him. I thought he had settled and would stay with us. He lifted his head. It was not a jerk, not a startle. It was a slow, listening rise, the way a wolf lifts its nose when snow is coming, or a father tips his ear for a child's voice in a crowded room. His eyes moved past me, past the old man, past the boy, past the ambulance lights. They fixed on the ruined house. What was left of the roof groaned. A beam fell inward with a tired sigh, sending a puff of sparks that looked almost gentle. "Easy," I said, my hand on his chest. "Easy, friend." I could feel the steady drum of his heart, fast but sure. He stood anyway. He set his paws under him like a decision. I tried to hold him. I did not grab hard. I knew better than to wrestle a creature who had just carried 2 souls out of fire. I just put my palm against his breastbone and asked him to wait. He looked at me. He looked at us, the way a man looks at his family when he has to leave for a dangerous job he never wanted. There was apology in it. There was promise. There was that human thing again, clear as daylight. He looked at us like he was apologizing for having to go back. something inside me tilted. Fear rushed in, loud and hot. I heard myself say there was no one left. I heard myself swear it. We had counted, we had watched, we had seen who came out, and who did not. We had not missed anyone, not this time, not after the boy, not after the old man. He broke away with no violence at all. He just slipped past my hand and moved. The movement had a kind of grace that made my throat close, not a sprint, not a panic, a purpose. He trotted toward the porch, shoulders rolling, tail low, ears forward, as if each step was a word in a sentence he had been writing since the first howl. People called after him. A woman said no, please, no. The boy said his name again, a name none of us had known until the boy gave it to him 2 breaths earlier in a whisper. The dog did not look back. Then, at the bottom of the steps, he paused. He turned his head and found my eyes. It lasted the length of a heartbeat and an echo. In that thin slice of time, I felt everything at once. Terror for him, awe at him, gratitude so strong it felt like pain, and a strange, shining certainty that he knew something we did not. He dipped his head, almost like a nod. "Wait," I said, though I knew he could not. He sprang up the steps and slipped into the smoke. For a moment, the crowd held its breath as one. The fire crackled, chewing through the last ribs of the house. The sirens washed the street in sound. The old man coughed, weak but alive. The boy wiped his face with a sooty sleeve and watched the door as if he could hold it open with his eyes. I told myself he would come right back out. I told myself he had only gone to check, to listen, to be sure the house was empty, the way he had been sure before anyone else. I told myself this was a simple loop, a last sweep, a final goodbye. If only I had known it was the start of something even the fire did not understand. The house groaned like something alive, and then a beam let go with a crack that made the street jump. The porch dipped, the roof sighed inward, people screamed. I felt the heat roll over us like a bad wind and tasted soot. I could not see him anymore. He had slipped into the doorway and disappeared as if the smoke had swallowed him whole. For one long heartbeat, I thought that was it, that the fire had finally taken him and the story would end right here with our hands empty. Then I heard it, not a howl this time. A bark, short and sharp, then another, 2 clean notes that cut through the noise and told us exactly where to look. I spun toward the sound and saw a hole blown out in the side of the house, a broken window low to the ground where the smoke curled like a gray river. The barking came again, followed by a thin, desperate cry that did not belong to any human throat. "Leave it!" someone shouted beside me, voice cracking. "If it's animals, it's not worth—" I did not agree, but I understood the fear in his words. The flames had started to stitch the roof to the floor. The house was coming down 1 slow inch at a time, and we were just bones and breath in its shadow. A small shape flashed at the window, then vanished. A tiny face, white-whiskered, eyes wide with terror. A cat. The cry came again, higher this time, and under it a steadier whimper, the sound puppies make when they wake up cold and cannot find their mother. The dog barked a 3rd time, the sound rising like a command. We yelled that animals were not worth dying for. We yelled it out of love and out of fear. We yelled it because we had children and parents and old friends still coughing in the yard, and our hearts could not take one more thing. "Come back," I shouted. "Please, friend, please." He did not listen. He appeared in the window like a shadow stepped into shape, muzzle first, shoulders next, smoke rolling off his back. Something small swung from his teeth. The cat, no bigger than 2 hands cupped together, hung by the scruff, limp but blinking. The dog placed his front paws on the sill, gathered his weight, and poured himself through the opening, landing hard on the dirt with the kitten held high. He did not drop it. He set it down as if the ground might bruise it. He turned back immediately. Before any of us could reach for him, he leapt, vanished, and the smoke swallowed him again. The window rattled with heat. The roof coughed sparks. I heard the whimper once more, followed by a small, frantic scrabble and the dull thud of something being nudged across a floor. The seconds stretched until they hurt. I could feel the crowd hold its breath, like one body trying not to cry. My hands shook so hard I had to press them together to keep from falling apart. He came back slower, his chest sawing, his eyes rimmed with ash. A tiny dog, all knees and ears, was tottering under his chin, too weak to climb, too scared to back away. The big dog slid his forelegs over the sill and hooked his chin under the pup's belly like a cradle. He lifted, an inch, another inch. The puppy's back legs scrabbled uselessly, and the dog adjusted, clamped his teeth gently into the loose skin at the back of the neck the way a mother would, and lifted just enough to clear the ledge. He did not flinch when a cinder landed on his flank. He did not let go when the window frame burned his paws. He did not look away when the roof above him groaned a warning. He carried them as gently as if they were his own children. We surged forward then, not to stop him, but to open the world wider for him. Hands reached, palms up. He stepped down like a man carrying glass, placed the puppy beside the kitten, and nosed them together until their shaking slowed. The boy, the one he had pulled from the fire before, crawled on his knees and held the two small bodies in his arms. The old man, wrapped in silver, lifted a trembling hand and laid it on the big dog's head with a care that made my throat close. The street changed in that moment. The fear did not leave us, but something washed through it, something quiet and clean. It was not that he had saved two small lives. It was how he had done it, the care, the choice, the way he moved as if love itself had weight and he was strong enough to carry it. "Why?" someone asked out loud, not to anyone in particular. No one answered. We did not need an answer. We could see it in his eyes, steady and bright, even through the smoke. He knew exactly what was at stake. We tried again to wrap him in the plastic blanket. We tried to make a circle around him and keep him there while the house finished breaking itself. I told him he had done enough. I told him no one would blame him if he lay down now and slept for a week. I told him that animals were safe, that he could rest, that we would take it from here. He sank to his elbows and put his head on the dirt, like he might agree. For one soft second, I believed it. I thought the mission was over. I thought the house could burn the rest of the way while we counted our blessings and learned how to breathe again. I thought he had accepted our thanks and that he would stay with us, just this once. If your heart is catching right now, you get it. Subscribe. This is where we tell the truth about nature's miracles. He lifted his head. It was the same slow, listening motion as before. He turned not to the kitten, not to the puppy, not to the old man or the boy. He turned to the house, now a skeleton holding its breath. A new sound came from deep inside, faint, broken, not an animal this time, a different kind of small, the kind you hear only when you are very quiet and the world is very loud. He stood. He took one step toward the doorway that was no longer a doorway, only a mouth of flame. He looked back at us, and in that look I felt the apology again, the promise again, the human thing that tied my ribs in a knot. "I thought that was the end," I whispered. I was wrong. He was breathing like the air hurt him, chest grinding, sides shuddering, but he would not step away from the house. He stood in the heat's red breath and watched the broken doorway the way a lighthouse watches a storm, steady, refusing to blink. The kitten and the little pup were tucked in a towel on the curb. The boy knelt beside them, whispering. The old man lay under the silver blanket, eyes closed, hand still resting where the dog's head had been. Sirens washed the street. Ash fell like slow snow. The dog did not move. I went to him with the blanket again. I spoke soft, the way you speak to someone who has already given more than you ever will. He let me touch his shoulder. His fur was hot and gritty, and I could feel the tremor under the skin. He lifted his head a fraction, ears flicking at a sound none of us heard. He was not guarding the house. He was waiting for someone. "Buddy," I said, "there is no one left." I said it the way a man says a prayer he wants to believe. The neighbors said it too. The paramedic checked his list and nodded. Names matched, faces matched. We had counted and counted again. People hugged the saved and scanned the windows and told each other it was over. No one believed there were still people inside. Reason was a ladder we kept climbing. The dog would not climb it with us. He drifted along the sidewall, not far, just a few slow steps, nose low, ears tight. He stopped by a buckled section of siding where the heat pushed out in gusts. He leaned into it, took it in like a message, and gave a narrow whine that curled in my chest. He looked back at me, not asking, not begging, confirming. He knew exactly what he was listening for. I felt something heavy drop inside me. "Help me get him to the truck," I called. 2 men came. We looped the blanket under his chest. He did not fight. He allowed us to lift a little, to drag a little. He sank his weight at the curb, like a tired horse easing to its knees. A woman brought a bowl and I wet my fingers and touched his tongue. He licked once and turned his head away. He was saving breath. He was saving time. For a moment he lay still, his eyes half closed. The tremor eased. The crowd softened. It felt like the story had finally come to its place of rest. We decided he would surrender to us now. We decided he would let us carry him away, and we would all live with the fire behind us. We decided this because our hearts needed it to be true. We looped a length of rope lightly over his neck, not a leash, just a promise. The boy slid his small hand under the rope, like he could help by holding it. The old man's eyes opened, milky and wet. He saw the rope. He nodded, slow and sure, like a blessing. The house groaned again, deeper, older, a sound from the bones of the place. We all flinched. And then, thin as a pin dropped on a wooden floor, a sound came from inside, a tapping, then the soft scrape of something trying to move, then a cough so quiet it might have been imagined. The rope twitched in my hand. His head lifted at once. He rose without a stagger, without complaint, as if a new engine had been fitted in his chest. He took one step. The rope went taut. The boy, brave and small, held on with both hands. The dog stopped, turned his face to us, and I saw it plain as daylight. I caught his gaze, and it felt like he was saying goodbye. "Wait," I said, though I knew I was asking the tide to turn around. He moved. He did not yank or snarl or tear the rope. He simply slipped it, a quick tilt and a lean, and he was free, sliding past our knees with the grace of a thing born to find doorways where we see walls. I reached for him and touched his shoulder and felt heat and muscle and a steadiness that broke me. He did not look angry. He did not look afraid. He looked resolved, like a man walking back into a building with a name in his mouth. "Please," a woman whispered. "Please don't." He took the porch steps in 2 measured bounds, paused at the threshold that was only flame, and glanced back one last time. The apology was there. The promise was there. That human thing was there, shining through the soot. He dipped his head, and then he went in. The heat jumped like something alive. A tongue of fire rolled across the doorway and vanished. The street made no sound. Even the sirens seemed to step back. I heard my own pulse in my ears. I heard the old man say a small prayer. I heard the boy whisper the dog's new name, the one he had given him in the dirt with a shaking mouth. I moved toward the door and felt a gloved hand clamp my arm. "No," a firefighter said, firm but kind. "You can't." He was right. I knew he was right, but everything in me leaned toward the sound I thought I had heard, that faint cough, that tapping, that whisper of a person too weak to shout. The dog had heard it too. He had gone because we had all lied without meaning to. We had said there was no one left. He had known better. Inside, a bark rang out. One, then two, short, precise, a map thrown into the air. Another cough answered, thin as thread. My whole body shook with fear and a hope that hurt. We had decided he would give up. We were wrong. The roof dropped another inch somewhere in the dark. Sparks spiraled out like fireflies and died on the sidewalk. I pressed my palm to the doorframe and felt the house shudder under my skin. I thought I heard him move. I thought I heard him stop. I thought I heard a small voice try and fail and try again. I told myself he would find them and come right back. I told myself he would step through the flames as easily as he had before. I told myself a story my heart could stand because the truth was too large to hold. And then, from deep inside, there came a sound I will carry forever, a low, steady growl that turned into a breathless, tugging grunt, the sound of a body hauling another body toward the light. The house made a sound like a tree tearing itself out by the roots. The roof folded. The porch buckled and spat sparks. Heat pressed the air flat. I took a step without meaning to and felt a firefighter's hand lock on my arm. For a breath, the doorway vanished under a moving wall of flame and smoke, and I thought that was the end. I thought we had lost him right there. Then I heard him again. Not a howl. A raw, dragging grunt, the sound of a body hauling another body toward light. I pushed forward until the heat stung my face. There, I said, though I could not see anything yet. There! A shape formed in the doorway, low and dark against the glare. He was backing out, shoulders first, paws splayed for purchase, teeth set in a sleeve. The woman's arm hung limp. Her hair was stuck to her face with soot. One bare foot trailed, toes black with ash. He pulled until his haunches hit the broken threshold, and then he surged, one hard heave from somewhere deeper than muscle. The porch let out another groan. A beam dropped like a hammer and missed him by the width of a hand. People screamed. He did not flinch. He pivoted his weight, clamped higher on the fabric, and dragged her one more foot, then another. A firefighter stepped in with a blanket held like a shield, took the heat on his shoulders, and reached. Together they worked, the man lifting, the dog pulling, both refusing to let the fire take what they had found. Horror had my chest in its teeth. Then her hand twitched. It was small, but it was a hand. A woman near me sobbed out a laugh that sounded like a prayer breaking open. The paramedic was there in a blink, mask ready, voice steady, making room, calling numbers I could not hear over the blood in my ears. We slid the woman clear of the threshold and the blanket came down. Her chest barely moved. The dog staggered to the dirt beside her. He planted his paws and nosed her shoulder like he was counting her heartbeats. His sides sawed. Each breath sounded like it scraped his lungs. Ash clung to his lashes and made gray tracks when he blinked. He looked up at me for the briefest beat, and I swear there was a question there, the same human question as before. Is she still here? Tell me she's still here. Airway, the paramedic said. Now. He tilted her head, cleared her mouth, fitted the mask, squeezed the bag in slow, careful pulses. We held our breath and waited for hers. She coughed. Once. A dry, small sound. Then again, deeper, like her lungs remembered how to move. The paramedic nodded. She's got it. She's got it. The crowd broke. People laughed and cried at the same time. A man raised both hands to the sky and whispered, "Thank you," over and over. Relief hit me so hard, I had to put my hands on my knees to stay upright. I looked at the dog. He was watching her, not us. He watched the way her chest started to lift under the mask, slow and shaky, and his own breath seemed to find a rhythm to match it. He did not lick her. He did not whine. He only watched, as if he had carried something heavy across a river and needed to see it set down safe on the other side. "Buddy," I said, my voice gone thin, "you did it. You did it." I wanted to believe that the story had finally, blessedly, found the place where it could rest. We had our horror. We had our miracle. We had our tears. We decided, all of us, that he would come back to us now. We thought he would live. We were wrong. He tried to stand. He got halfway, legs trembling, and then steadied. He took one step toward me, then another, and put his head against my leg the way he had before, looking up as if to say it was all right now. I slid my hand under his jaw and felt the heat and the rasp of burned whiskers and the slick edge of his tongue as he swallowed air. The woman's eyes fluttered. Her fingers twitched for the mask. The paramedic said her name, soft, steady, like a promise. The dog turned his head toward her. In the chaos and siren and smoke, everything inside me went quiet. I saw his eyes, bright and tired, lock on her face. He looked at the woman he had saved, and he closed his eyes forever. For a second, the world did not move. The sirens pulled back. The crowd froze. Even the flames seemed to hold their breath. I felt the weight come down through his skull into my palm, gentle, almost like sleep. I said his name once. It came out as a breath. I said it again. It broke. The boy crept forward on his knees and touched the dog's shoulder like you touch a holy thing. The old man lifted his hand from the silver blanket and made a trembling cross in the air. The paramedic, who had been all action and orders, went very still and bowed his head for the space of one slow breath. Horror had been there a moment ago. It washed out of me like tide. In its place came a rush of joy so sharp it hurt. She was alive, and then the grief rose to meet it, and the two feelings crashed together and turned to tears. I cried for the woman breathing under the mask. I cried for the dog at my feet. I cried because I did not know a heart could hold both things at once and not split open. Someone laid the plastic blanket over his body and then stopped, hands shaking. "Wait," I said. I was not ready to cover his eyes. I needed to see them one more time, even closed. I needed to fix the sight of his face in my mind so it would never move. "We thought he'd come back to us," a neighbor whispered. "We thought he'd be all right." "He made sure she was," I said, though my throat barely worked. "He made sure she was." Around us, the house finally let go. A section of roof slid in with a roar, sending up a column of sparks that drifted and died like small, bright souls. The firefighters moved, sure and swift, making space, holding lines, finishing what had to be finished. The paramedic called for transport. The woman's breathing steadied another shade. Life reached for her and took hold. I kept my hand where his head had been. I could still feel the shape of him in my palm, like heat leaves its ghost on skin. I knew he could not hear me, but I said it anyway. "You did it, friend. You did it." And somewhere inside all that noise, a quiet settled, the kind that comes when a thing too big to understand has finished happening, and the only honest sound left is a human heart breaking with gratitude. We stood around him without speaking. Sirens still wailed, but softer, like they knew to bow their heads. Men who never cried let it happen. Women crossed themselves and whispered the names of saints and the names of their mothers. Ash drifted down and stuck to our wet faces. The house hissed and folded in on itself, but our eyes were not on the house anymore. They were on him. I knelt and put my hand where his head had rested. The ground was warm. My palm remembered the weight that had been there a breath ago. The paramedic worked over the woman, counting air into her lungs, saying soft words meant to anchor her to this side. She breathed. She coughed. She lived. And all of us stood in the same circle, holding a joy that tasted like salt and a grief that tasted the same. The little puppy wriggled out from the towel and tottered toward him on shaky legs. Someone tried to catch it. The pup ducked the hand, crawled along the curve of his shoulder, and pressed its belly to his ribs. It made a tiny sound and went still. The kitten did the same, small body vibrating with leftover fear, nose tucked into his neck as if nuzzling a memory. I felt my throat close. He had carried them like his own. Now they lay against him like he was home. A firefighter stepped forward with the plastic blanket and stopped. He waited. He looked to me, though I had no right to decide anything. I shook my head once. Not yet. The old man reached out from under his silver sheet and touched the dog's paw with 2 fingers, as if blessing a child. The boy slid closer on his knees and set his forehead to the dog's shoulder. In that hush, I heard everything at once: the crackle of beams, the hiss of water, the woman's rough breaths, the soft tick of cooling metal, and over it, the silence where his breathing had been. I thought that with time I would forget this day. I thought the noise would fade, that faces would blur, that memory would do its kind work and soften the edges. I thought I would wake one morning and it would all feel far away, like a story told about someone else. We lifted him with the blanket at last, slow and careful, the way you lift a friend who is sleeping. 2 firefighters held the corners. I took a third. The boy walked beside us, touching the fabric with one hand like a promise. The crowd parted without a word. Hats came off. Hands went to hearts. The street felt like a church without walls. The woman opened her eyes for a second as we passed. Her gaze wandered, unfocused, then found the shape on the blanket. She tried to lift her hand. It shook and fell. The paramedic steadied her and brought her fingers to rest against the edge of the stretcher, so they brushed the blanket as we moved by. Her lips shaped a word. It might have been thank you. It might have been his name. We set him in the shade of the truck, away from the heat, under a scrap of sky that was finally turning from brown to blue. Someone brought a bowl of clean water and set it nearby out of habit. Another neighbor placed a torn red scarf over his chest, because it looked like it belonged there. The puppy whimpered once and then tucked its face into the scarf. The kitten kneaded the fabric with tiny paws and settled. I looked at his face and felt it hit me, clear as a bell rung in a small room. I had just watched nature show its wisdom through a dog. Not a trick, not a folk tale, a truth so plain it burned. A creature who had nothing, who belonged to no one, knew exactly what we were worth, and acted as if our lives were his own to carry. Animals know more about us than we think. Men wiped their eyes and did not hide it. Women crossed themselves again and whispered blessings not just for the saved, but for the one who had done the saving. Someone started a quiet prayer, and it rolled through us like a breeze. I heard the old man murmur that he would bring fresh bread to the riverbank every morning from now on. I heard the boy say he would keep the puppy, voice small and fierce, like he was promising the world. I promised nothing out loud. I just laid my hand on the dog's shoulder and tried to learn how to breathe in a world where he was gone. Days later, the smell of smoke still clung to the street. People walked slower when they passed the curb where he had lain. A woman tucked flowers into a crack in the sidewalk. Someone left a metal tag without a name on it, threaded on a string. The old man came with his cane and sat for a while and said nothing, and when he stood, he touched the spot with his fingers. The boy brought the puppy, now a little steadier on its legs, and let it sniff the place and then sit. The kitten, someone had taken it in, watched from a window with bright, solemn eyes. Weeks passed. We tried to tell the story and found our throats closing in the same place every time. We tried not to tell it and found our hearts crowding with it anyway. The woman came back to the street with slow steps and stood where the porch had been. She touched her own chest like she was counting beats. She looked up at the sky and said nothing. We understood. I had thought time would smooth it down. Instead, each day pressed the memory deeper. A year later, it felt like one long breath. The air still went thin when I heard a dog bark at night. 2 years later, my hand still remembered the weight of his head. 3 years later, I could still feel the heat on my skin and the way his eyes searched for a face and found mine. The memory did not fade. It grew. It lifted new questions, and set them down gently where I could see them. Who are we to each other? What do we owe? How far does love reach when no one is watching? I walk past that corner and I can feel him there, steady as a lighthouse in the storm we were. I tell myself I will forget someday. I never do. I do not want to. Years passed before I could walk back to that corner without my legs shaking. The street was different. New siding, a young tree, a bench where the porch used to be, but the air still held a trace of ash if the wind turned just so. I came on a quiet morning, the kind that makes sound carry. I told myself I was only passing through, only curious, only ready at last. I wanted to convince myself it had all been luck, a strange chain of accidents tied together by smoke and fear, nothing more than the mind's way of making meaning. The stone stopped me. It was set low in the grass, simple and honest, with words cut deep enough to last. He saved people until his last breath. Someone had rubbed the letters clean. Someone had tucked a strip of red cloth under the edge. A child had left a drawing, faded by weather, a dog with big eyes and a tail like a flag. A brass tag lay on the top, no name stamped on it, just a circle catching light. I stood there longer than I meant to. I touched the stone with 2 fingers, the way you greet an old friend you do not know how to hug. Behind me, the town went on with its chores. A truck rattled over a pothole. A woman called to someone from a doorway. A bike chain clicked. It all sounded like it belonged again, and for a breath, that made it worse. Then I heard paws on the path and turned. The puppy he had carried out was no puppy now. He had the long legs of a dog who runs for joy and the calm step of a dog who knows where he belongs. He came up slow, giving me time to decide if this was welcome. I crouched without thinking. He lowered his head into my hand like we had practiced it for years. One ear had a small scar that caught the light. His eyes were clear and steady, the color of wet bark. He circled the stone and set himself down beside it with his shoulder against the granite. He did not lie on it the way dogs lie on cool things for comfort. He leaned, like he was sharing warmth. He looked at the carving, then at me, then back again, as if he could read. A moment later, the cat appeared, a grown slip of gray with white whiskers, stepping from the fence with the slow precision of a creature that trusts its place. It rubbed the edge of the stone and settled on the dog's paws. The 2 of them sat like that, a small stillness in the middle of the road. Children came in a knot, backpacks bouncing, voices soft the way voices get when kids pass a grave. They saw the dog and the cat by the stone and fell quiet. One of them touched the red cloth and straightened it. Another pointed at me and whispered, "He was here that day." I did not know how they knew. Maybe it was the way I could not take my hand off the granite. Maybe the story has a way of marking people. They asked me to tell it. I tried. The words came out in fits and starts, then in a run, then broke and had to be gathered. They already knew the beats. They filled them in without showing off, like people humming the harmony to a hymn. They had made a ritual of 2 short barks, the signal he gave us in smoke, and they gave them now, soft, almost shy, and for a second, I heard them as if the fire still roared and we were all holding our breath together. The dog lifted his head at that sound. He gave the same 2 barks, clean and quick, and the children looked at one another with wide eyes. It made my skin prickle. Not fear exactly, but the old electricity that comes when your body recognizes a pattern before your mind agrees. He got to his feet and moved toward the curb. A small boy had stepped into the street without looking. The dog slid between him and the lane and nudged him back with a shoulder, gentle and sure, then returned to the stone. The boy's mother called, "Thank you." The dog didn't glance her way. He kept his eyes on the words. I told myself it was training. Someone must have taught him to herd. Someone must have practiced those 2 barks. Coincidence, I said. Learned behavior. That was the story my reason reached for, like a coat you put on in bad weather. I wanted to wear it and be done. The boy from that day, no longer a boy, taller now, voice deeper, came up the path with a leash draped loose in his hand. He nodded to me in the shy, adult way small towns teach. The dog went to him, pressed his head into his thigh, then looked back at the stone. He does that every time, the young man said, not quite meeting my eyes. We don't make him, he just does. He smiled, then blinked too fast and crouched to straighten the brass tag. The cat flicked its tail like a blessing. The children started to leave in twos and threes, but one small girl hung back. She traced the carved words with a finger, sounding them out under her breath, and then asked me if it really happened the way people say. I told her it happened exactly that way, and more than words can hold. I told her it was all true. She nodded like she already knew. We stood there until the sun slid to the far side of the streetlight. The dog shifted and rested his chin on the stone. The cat's whiskers twitched against his fur. The young man told me the dog sleeps by the river and rises early, same as the one before him did, and how sometimes at night he wakes and goes to the edge of town and sits facing the road, listening. For what? I asked. He shrugged. He comes back when he's ready. I wanted again to say it was only habit. I wanted to file it under things animals do because we shape them. I wanted to believe I had imagined the last look in the fire that day, the apology and the promise, the human thing shining through the soot. I wanted the edges to dull, but I could not forget his eyes, not then, not now. I see them when a siren passes. I see them when a dog barks twice in the distance and the hair on my arms lifts. I see them when I close my own eyes and the street goes quiet. He looked at me like I was his own. When I try to tell it straight, I always end up back at the beginning, the first breath I lost to the sound that cut the smoke. When I heard a dog howling through fire and sirens, my breath caught, because I knew it was not an accident. I did not know why I knew. I only knew the howl was not fear. It was a call, a clear note sent into the worst day we had ever seen, and it found me the way a lighthouse finds a ship that still has miles of darkness to cross. I can see it now, as if the air is still hot on my face, the house throwing sparks like angry stars, people calling names into the roar, my own hands shaking so hard I could hear my knuckles click. And then that stray, only he was not a stray anymore, moving with purpose a person would recognize, going where none of us could make ourselves go. There are moments you live through once and then live with forever. This was mine. I keep trying to make it smaller so my mind can carry it. Reason is tidy like that. It says dogs are animals, instinct is a loop, a fire is just chemistry, and memory is a storyteller that keeps sweetening the tea. Reason says he was a lucky stray, in the wrong place, doing one right thing and then another, because the noise pushed him that way. It says coincidence wears a hero's face sometimes. My heart does not buy it. My heart says a soul came to our street in a brown, smoke-streaked coat and refused to leave until we were counted. Every last one. I have done the math 100 times. If he had not barked twice, sharp and sure, we would not have found the window. If he had not dragged the old man inch by inch, our hands would have been too late. If he had not lifted the kitten and then the puppy, some quiet would have gone missing from our town, and no one would have known why they were sad. If he had not pulled the woman from the mouth of the fire, a name would have turned to ash in our mouths that day. I can see his paws on the sill. I can see his eyes steady on her face. I can see the moment he looked at the woman he saved and closed his eyes forever. Reason keeps asking for footnotes and measurements and proof. It says, animals do not choose. It says, sacrifice is a word for stories. But when I close my eyes, I am back on that curb with ash in my teeth, and I feel his head in my palm, heavy and trusting, and I know choosing when I feel it. He looked at me like I was his own, And then he went where I could not, because someone was still inside. I did not send him. None of us did. He went because he knew what life is worth. Some nights, when the town is quiet and the river makes that soft sound it makes, I hear two barks in the distance, and my skin prickles like it did in the smoke. A dog crosses the road and nudges a child back to the sidewalk with a shoulder. A cat sits on a low stone and waits for the sun to turn warm. The woman he saved holds a paper cup at the market and laughs with her sister and tilts her head when a siren goes by, as if counting heartbeats. The boy he carried out holds the leash of a lanky dog with calm eyes and an old scar on one ear, and the leash is slack because trust can be slack. The old man walks slower now, but he still stops at the corner and touches the air like it has a pulse. People ask me sometimes if I am sure. They ask because they trust me, because they want permission to believe, because stories like this rub right up against the part of us that is tender and skeptical at the same time. I tell them I am as sure as a man can be about the day he watched the world shift. I tell them I would not lie where the truth is already strong enough to carry us. I tell them I have tried to forget details and cannot, which is not how stories the mind makes up behave. I tell them the truth may be bigger than my words, but it is not smaller. At the stone, the words are simple and right. He saved people until his last breath. I touch the letters and the cut in the rock fits my fingers like a place I belong. The dog who grew from the small life carried out of the flames lies against the granite as if sharing the burden of being remembered. The gray cat with white whiskers threads the leash and sits on the dog's paws. Children pass and give two soft barks because that is how the story breathes in them now. I stand there and try on my old coat of reason again, the one that kept me dry for so many years. It does not fit like it used to. I have learned that some truths ask you to stand in the rain. The day he died, the sky did not do anything special. No rays through clouds, no hush falling like a curtain. The fire went on being fire. The water went on being water. The world kept its face because that is what the world does. The miracle was not that the elements rearranged themselves for us. The miracle was that a living being took the heat into his lungs and made a path for another breath to follow. The miracle was an act inside the ordinary, jaw on a sleeve, paws on a sill, a body choosing to spend itself down to the last coin. The miracle wore fur and came with a smell of smoke and river mud. I could try to explain it away. I could say he had heard someone. I could say muscle memory pulled him forward. I could say pack instinct accidentally lit the fuse of courage. I could stack words until they made a ladder I could climb down from this feeling. But I have stood at the top of that ladder and looked, and there is nothing down there I want. The view is better from the part of my life where I admit what I saw. He taught me without speaking. He taught me that being alive is an active verb. He taught me that nature is not a backdrop we act against, but a mind and a heart running right next to ours, sometimes ahead. He taught me that love is a thing with teeth and smoke in its eyes that still moves gently, because gentleness is stronger than heat. He taught me that we are only strangers until someone chooses us. I can hardly believe myself, but I saw it with my own eyes. A dog gave his life to save people, and ever since, I know, nature is wiser and kinder than we are. If your heart is full of reverence right now, write, nature is wiser than us.